Welcome to another episode of Untethering Shame, where we explore the complex layers of shame and the journey to healing. Today, we're diving into the dynamics of shame and blame with Margie Breault. Margie is a foundational root teacher, flow coach, way shower, and medium. She's undergone her own deep healing journey, continuously liberating herself from projections, limitations, and trauma. Margie's work focuses on guiding others to discover the light in their own path by sharing wisdom that's been passed down to her through generations. Shame and blame often go hand in hand. We blame ourselves or others as a way to make sense of our pain, but this cycle can deepen the sense of shame, trapping us in a story where suffering becomes our identity. Margie will help us explore how we can own the control we have in our stories without over-identifying with what's happened to us or what we've done. Accountability is a key piece of this puzzle, understanding what it means to take responsibility for our own healing without staying tethered to the wounds of our past. Through today's conversation, we'll also discuss how these concepts can unfold in real-life settings, whether in personal reflection, therapy session, or discussion. This work is at the heart of our mission on Untethering Shame, to create a space where healing is possible and shame is no longer a prison, but a stepping stone to self-liberation. So let's dive in. Hi, Margie. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me and creating this space.
I'm excited. I feel like particularly this topic that we're going to be talking about today, it's so big. We could go in so many directions. And I feel like it's a topic that's often not talked about enough, not talked about in detail. I don't even know, but it just feels like blame is this big, heavy-handed sword that gets swung around, but we're not really conscious that we're doing it to ourselves, to other people, or how to heal from it. So I think that we have a lot to explore. But before we dive in, I love to start every episode just doing a feelings check. So I'm curious for you, if you could describe how you're feeling right now with one word, what would it be?
Calm.
I like that. Has that been the sentiment for the whole day, or does it feel like it's shifted as you're here in this space?
That's been the sentiment for most of my day. And I luckily facilitate a sound and meditation at noontime on Tuesdays. So we're recording on a Tuesday for anyone who's listening in.
Yes.
And so I had a beautiful journey today already. So I think maybe I wasn't completely calm before that, but still that was most of the vibe. But now I'm pretty calm.
Oh,
It's
that's
like
awesome.
a state of surrender. I'm pretty surrendered.
I like that. I feel like we just got back from our second trip, family trip, but bundled in that I was doing speaking events for both travel trips. So we went from Portland to San Diego. We came back for a few days, then we flew to Wisconsin, and we were seeing everyone. We're both from Wisconsin originally. So my husband and I were seeing family, seeing friends, seeing all these people, but with our 4-year-old and traveling. And we're like just at the cusp of where vacations will start to show up again. Like now everything is like a trip, just a little bit more work. So we're not fully relaxed. And so coming off of that, my daughter is definitely like desperate to get back on a routine, but doesn't quite understand that she's desperate to get back on a routine. So it's coming through with like different behaviors, different pieces. And so I would say I'm still in a bit of, it's like a balance on a teeter-totter, and it's like balanced perfectly in the middle between sort of like vibrating, like it's not fully chaotic, but it's just a little jumbled and yet also patient. Like I have this feeling like I know that this is what happens when things are chaotic and busy. And I don't feel this like, I don't know, like urgency and almost like frustration that things don't feel like normal. And I can also tell that like I'm ready to be done traveling and have a bit of our routine back. So just even recording today was nice to be back with someone just like doing work in a way that felt really good and exciting.
Well, and so I love that for you. I love that you're back into a place where you're getting back into your own little routine, but also what you just described and like talking about coming into, understanding that there's chaos around you, but like not really fully giving in to the chaos, just witnessing
Mm.
it, what you're doing is alchemizing that energy, right? That's like
Mm.
literally alchemy. You're not giving into the chaos, you're witnessing it, you're noticing it, you're not judging it, and you're like, "Ooh, okay, like, let's use this for something else." Maybe you're putting it back into the universe to be reused, maybe you're using it for your own power and creation, maybe you're generating it for that own calmness and peacefulness that you're feeling as you're going back into your routine, but you're not agreeing that the chaos is something that you need to stay away from. You're recognizing and observing it from a place of freedom.
Oh, I like that, and I like as I've gotten better, I think, at doing those things, we were flying home on Saturday. We had a flight to Chicago, so it was like a 45-minute flight, like a very small connector, and then our flight from Chicago back to Portland was like 4 hours. We had a long layover. My daughter was just done. It was like a week of poor sleep and, probably not eating like a full real meal because she was so scattered with like all the distractions of people and pets at every house we were at and all these different things. And then we were on the plane for almost 2 hours before they made the decision that we had to deplane because there was a mechanical issue that they couldn't fix with the team on site. They needed to fly in a specialist from Seattle. And so they ended up having a spare plane. Long story short, we were able to get on a plane and get home, but we were supposed to get home at like 4:30. We didn't get home until almost 9 at night. And old me, and I don't just we'll say a different version of me, not old me necessarily, but a different version of me that has existed in the past would have been very flustered by that. My kid was exhausted. I don't know if she had a fever or not, but she was so hot. She was so uncomfortable. Again, I think just exhausted because as soon as she got home and had a good night's sleep, she was fine the next day. But she was petering out. And when she's not feeling good, I'm the person she wants. So even though I had my husband and my mother in law, it was like, I just want mom. So I was like, I'm exhausted. I haven't slept. These have been work trips and fun trips, which makes it even more complex. I just want to get home. I feel like I can't control things, which is the thing I crave most when I'm like stuck in my own stuff. And I like looked over at my mother-in-law who I could tell was starting to get kind of flustered and she's like feeling this tension that's getting created in her body. And as that was happening and I'm sort of listening to her, I realized how much I didn't have and how much I would have had if that other version of me had shown up on the plane. And it was just this like, you know, they could have not found this issue. And it was bad enough they have to fly in somebody across the country to fix it. Gosh, what if they had flown with it and something scary happened? What if there was a plane crash? What if something really bad happened? What if they had to land suddenly in the middle of somewhere that didn't have airplanes to get us home? All these different things. And I just was in this state of surrender of like, all I can do is show up with love and kindness for everybody that's on this plane right now that is feeling the same sense of angst that I'm being invited to feel. And I've never been able to do that before. Like the calm that I was in that moment, I was like, yeah, I'd like to be home at 4 o'clock too. I wanted a couple hours to myself. Looks like we're not going to get that. Guess what? I'm lucky enough that I'll get that time tomorrow. How great can that be for me? And like how much more compassion can I put into this space? And that definitely shifted it. So I like that alchemy term because it really does make me think about the power that I was able to use in that moment to shift my experience. And I do think that is what allowed my kid to not completely lose her shit too when she was so exhausted, was to be by someone who did that.
Absolutely, because our kids are connecting into our energy, and the people around us, even whether they recognize it or not, are influenced by our energy. So when we
Mhm.
cannot go into the out of flow and the out of rhythm and the highest discordant frequency and not the most coherent frequency, right? Then we are helping to
Mm.
shift the vibration of a space because that's how vibration and rhythm work.
Mm. I love this. I'm so curious. I want to bring blame into the conversation now too, because obviously I think there's a lot of conversation around energy and where we're at when it comes to when we get in that state. And so we had settled on this conversation around blame. And I think both of us have so many big experiences, ideas, thoughts around what this term is. I'm curious for you, why do we need to talk about blame? Why is this a topic that needs to be more in the light in these conversations? Why is this important?
Ugh, I'm so glad you're asking this question. So, the idea of shame and blame being a way of life is something that's like ingrained into our society. And it's because people have so much difficulty, and you can see it in the world right now, so much difficulty about just taking accountability for their words, deeds, and actions, things that they actually did
Mm,
and said. And that accountability feels difficult and hard for people because we've been taught to believe that no one will love you or you'll be abandoned or how could you actually do that to someone because we're in this space where we're so disconnected from the thing that is unity consciousness, right? We're so disconnected from our
mhm,
heart that we don't recognize that even when we make mistakes, that someone can still love us because we've been taught that mistakes are bad and that we're not allowed to make them and that there's things that we're not supposed to talk about and there's things that we're not supposed to do. And if we do them, no one could ever possibly love us. There's so many things
mhm,
that we go through in life that are constantly through this lens of shame and blame. And so those are both really heavy emotions to feel and that people throw at us, right? Like guilt is typically a story that someone else has made up about the situation and then thrown at us and then we feel shame and blame. Right. And then
mm,
we go back and forth with this like throwing shame and blame because we don't want to take accountability, or we take so much of the shame and blame that we feel like horrible people. We agree to those stories and we think that that's who we are. We wear it like this is who we are. And then we experience so much separation from ourselves and others when we're just living that way of life. Shame and blame is not the liberation of suffering, it just causes more
mm-mm,
suffering. So when you're taking
mhm,
accountability or you're becoming aware of something that you've done that's caused harm, it's not to shame and blame it. It's not to experience a tremendous amount of guilt and throw these stories back and forth. It's really just to be like, I didn't realize I was causing pain to myself or others. I'm sorry. No matter what it
mhm,
is. But because
mhm,
people have no idea how to express their emotions or even feel their emotions first and foremost without throwing it back out because we're so disconnected from that processing of the emotions. That's typically what happens
mhm,
with shame and blame. And why so many people agree to that as a way of life, which is a way that I was brought up in my own childhood to experience life. Like shame
yeah,
and blame was the only way of life.
yeah,
There was hints of like a pretend compassion, what people think compassion is, and pretend empathy and what people think empathy was. But my form of empathy was really just like honestly tiptoeing around on eggshells because I didn't want to be a problem. Right. So I was
yeah,
so hyper vigilant on other people's emotions because I didn't want to experience shame and blame. I didn't want to
yeah.
experience what they couldn't take accountability for.
Well, it's so interesting, and obviously, I'm thinking about this through the lens of my own story, but also through my 4.5-year-old, and I think what you said that's so key. So, this conversation I had last week in one of the presentations was around essentially radical acceptance and control and learning how to take responsibility for what's ours and let go of what isn't. And so much of the conversation is around our sense of self is where we need to start with the healing, because I can give you here, set these boundaries, do these things. But when your sense of self is still so unrooted and completely based on how other people respond to you, you're going to stay in those cycles of shame and blame. And so the idea being, I am not worthy, lovable, good enough as I am. And I'm then going to take the position, which I like how you describe it. We kind of go back and forth one end or the other of either everybody else is the problem. It has to be everybody else because that's a defense to protect me from being the worst person in the room.
Hmm.
Or I am the problem and I have to hold that and name that and stay stuck in that. And there's a weird safety in that too of like, if I see it and call it out, then maybe I can somehow perform or pretend, or at least I'm knowledgeable about what other people are thinking in the room. And then your whole way of existing in the world is based on that, either taking a position of low power. Again, I'm the one that's the terrible, horrible person. I'm going to take care of everyone else. That's where the people pleasing, that's where the sort of silence, that passiveness comes into play. Or I'm going to take the route of sort of dominating and I'm going to bully, I'm going to push down, I'm going to deflect on other people, both as a means of protecting and defending against this pain that we have of, I am not worthy. I'm not lovable. I'm not good enough. And the idea that that comes from passed down stories. Most of us that are listening to this, if we think about our parents or caregivers, their parents or caregivers, existed in the same stories. They just maybe didn't have the same tools or conversations as we're having now around you are more than what you do, that you as a person has value. It's not about having to meet needs and expectations of other people. But when we've been conditioned to believe that love, acceptance, and belonging is conditional, if it's for kids, shut up and don't make too much noise, do what you're
Mhm.
told, whatever those things are, you don't know how to experiment with, well, what's mine, what's yours? You just know what you're told, and then you either internalize it or you deflect it. And that's both sides are painful. And like you said, keeps us stuck in this feedback loop of just constantly shaming and blaming ourselves or the people around us, all in that state of fear and protection against some state that we don't even know what it is, but we're afraid what would happen if we let all of that armor down.
Absolutely, and most of the time, we don't even recognize that we have a choice, right? We
Mm.
don't even know that we can choose not to agree with that we can choose to say, that's not true for me." We can choose to
Yeah.
witness it from a free place because typically what happens is an emotion comes in, and that emotion then triggers all of these thoughts that are happening.
Mhm.
It triggers all of these stories that come with that when we felt that emotion before. And what happens is people get lost in the thought and the story, right? They feel the emotion
Mhm.
and instead of processing it and witnessing it as the observer, they go with it, right? So
Mhm.
now they're not experiencing the emotion from a free place and observing the trigger. They're going
Mhm.
into the trigger and getting lost in it. It's kind of like a cyclone or a tornado, right?
Mhm.
But really then it goes, those ways of the roles, right? Then you either go into protector, you go into to perpetrator, or you go into
Mhm.
victim, right? You go one of those places when you're experiencing that.
Yep.
And the thing about roles is when you go there, you're actually doing all three of them at the same time to
Exactly.
one person or another, right?
Uh-huh.
If you are leaving yourself, you're perpetrating yourself, right?
Yep.
So even if you're going to save somebody, right, you're perpetrating against yourself.
Yeah.
You're agreeing that that person's a victim. You're perpetrating against yourself, which is also perpetrating against them because you're not allowing them to take accountability for whatever situation or rise to the occasion and own their power. You're
Right.
completely taking their abilities away. You're trying to preserve and protect without allowing them to understand that the masculine and feminine are alive in all of us, right?
Mhm.
We have to be able to preserve and protect ourselves. It's not our job to save other people.
Yeah, and that I think so I always use the words so the drama triangle is essentially what you're describing, and so I always
Mhm.
talk about as hero, victim, villain, and so I like that perpetrator, prosecutor, victim, and so the same terms, and that's what a lot of the conversations are around is you're trapped in a cycle where you're basically oscillating through all three. You're just ping-ponging around into these different corners, and it's either my job is to take care of everybody else around me, which then thereby means I'm not taking care of myself, or I am at fault for everything that happens to everyone around me, which is this overinflation of the ego that we have power and control that we don't have. But it comes again from that place of, I'm supposed to do this. I don't think I'm better. I think that I have to do this to have value and to be in the room, or the world is against me and everything is terrible. And so then it becomes that. And then we take that sort of victim stance. And then everybody else around us is the problem. I think about like traffic being the key example of that when we're just like in traffic, pissed that somehow the world screwed us over because they decided to all get in our way versus realizing that we're all a part of it in our own sort of vessels. And so, okay, I'm curious for you because obviously there's a lot of people listening to this are gonna be like, okay, yes, what in the world do I do about it? But before we go to that, because I think people rush to action often really quickly to be like, I need to fix this. I need to fix this. Help me understand for you, because you're describing like you've lived this cycle, you've seen this cycle, you've talked about breaking this cycle. What did it look like for you? Can you give us some context about how it might have been applied in a life and then how you gained some insight into just how deeply seated these things were?
Yeah. So to understand that piece of the story, you need to understand some of the stories and limitations that I walked with. So me
Mm.
being separated from self and me being separated from being able to identify emotions or identify truth of any nature, that I was pulled apart from that really early on in life. So around the age of 4 is my first time remembering being separated from myself.
Mm. And what did that mean for you? Because there's people hearing that are like, "I don't know what that means. What does that mean?"
Unfortunately, my mother had a really hard time taking accountability for things. So really early on in life, I became a scapegoat for all the things that she couldn't take accountability. So
Mm.
this projection of all of the things that she couldn't own in herself, she needed me to be. And I didn't know that I was gladly being those things for her, but I was. And so around the age of 4, she started this practice of having me look in the mirror and tell myself I was a liar. And I don't even remember what exactly I had said or done that upset her taking accountability or not in that moment, but she didn't realize that in that moment that she was having me agree that I was a liar and telling myself that in the mirror, right? She didn't have the tools that I do in my life now to recognize that she was creating a story for me that I would have to recognize that I didn't have to agree to at some point in my life. And, the practice of looking in the mirror didn't happen every day, but it happened often, and it wasn't always like a liar. Sometimes it was other things that she was making me tell myself. But really, it's happened in so many ways, right? That example of having me look in the mirror made me think that I was a liar and that I was always gonna lie. My mom has struggled with mental health her whole life. She has borderline personality disorder, untreated, and still does. We don't have a relationship physically at this point in my life.
Mhm.
And so things like I liked chaos. I was the cause and source of pain. I liked
Mm.
drama. I was manipulative. I was all of these things. Really early in my life, she started teaching me how to lie and manipulate by pretending I was sick. And that would also help her get out of work because she would coach me on how to call
Mhm.
her office so that she could also leave. And I thought that was us bonding, but really it was teaching me how to be the liar that she told me that I was. And so
Mm.
I learned how to lie about things. I thought that I was always sick because I was taught that I was always sick, and then to also lie about being sick to get out of things that I wanted to do. I was taught that my immune system was bad because her immune system was bad. I was taught that, I had sexual abuse starting around the age of 10. And when I first tried to tell my parents, I was told that I was misconstruing a cousin's touch, a cousin's love. My cousin was 20 years older than me at the time. And so I
Mm.
thought, "Oh, like, this is normal, whatever it is that
Yeah.
is happening." And when I was 12, he molested me in the room with everyone present. Everyone was sleeping, but my whole family was in the room. I had a burnt hand, and he hurt my hand in the process of this, and so I yelled, "Ow," and my family woke up. My mother told me to go to bed. So I'm 12 years old. The next morning, I come downstairs, and my mom says to me, "Look at what you're wearing. If your cousin ever touched you, it would be your fault, not his." So
Mm.
reinforcing like the shame and blame as a way of life, that everything bad that happened in my life was my fault, that I was a liar, that I was a manipulator, that I was no good. All of these stories started really, really early.
Mhm.
So as I progressed in my life, as I got older, I had this really, can we swear on the show?
Of course you can swear.
I had this really fucked up sense of self, or really disconnected sense of self. Like, I didn't even know who I was. I didn't know what truth was. Thought I was just like this ever present being that caused pain, and I was constantly trying to make up for it. Right. And then I would see myself lie, and I would get so fucking mad at myself because here I am doing exactly what my mom told me I was. And I so much wanted to not be that person. I didn't want to
Mm.
be the person who was the liar, who liked chaos, who manipulated. I didn't want to. I hated that version of me, but I didn't know I didn't have to agree. So
Mm.
I also was in and out of therapy during this time. And
By your
therapy,
choice? By your
not
choice
by
or
choice.
theirs?
No, by
Okay.
theirs. And I learned how to become a better liar and to put a mask on. I didn't learn how to connect in with myself and get to the root of traumas. I didn't learn skills to use outside of that talk therapy room. I learned to be fake. I learned to pretend, even go further into positive projection. I learned to pretend with fancy words.
Yeah.
And so when I was in my early 20s, a friend of mine introduced me to energy medicine because I was in like depression, like you couldn't believe, and I didn't want anyone to know how depressed and unhappy I was. So I was in this constant positive projection of pretending everything was all good all the time. I was in that overflated ego where I thought I had the power because I thought everything was my fault and I wanted to fix it all the time. But I also simultaneously was in like at the same time, nothing in my life was my fault. Like, nothing that was happening to me directly was my
Mm,
fault. Everyone else's pain and suffering was their fault. My pain and suffering was everyone else's fault, which, like, you can
hmm,
imagine, that's not a very balanced place to be. So
yeah.
I was a little all over the place. And so going into Reiki as my first form of energy medicine, I felt great going onto that table. I was like, "Oh my god, I didn't know I could feel this light. I didn't know I could do this." But in those Reiki sessions, there was still no tools. I still wasn't connecting to self. I felt great for a couple of days, but I went immediately back into separation. I went immediately back into
Yeah, it's your
all the
norm.
obstacles, my norm, because I didn't know who I was. So getting an introduction to learning about wisdom modalities on a deeper level so that I could begin to practice them for myself is where I started untethering shame and blame as a way of life. It's where I started
Mm,
untethering the disconnection from those limiting beliefs that I was told to believe about myself that I didn't know how to choice. And truly, my introduction to the community that I grow with and the mentors that I work with now, Lisa Ashwari Murphy and Nicole Pepin from the Svaha Yoga and Synergy of Sound Academy, is truly where I had true healing and where I still have true healing and where I offer that to others because I'm a teacher and and a way shower and a healer myself, but it's through that lens of natural law and bringing everybody back into the where science and spirituality meet because natural law is Bonpo pre-religion, the way that ancient and aboriginal beings worked in unison with the world. And we've been taken out of that because people went into
mhm.
the opposite vortex of wanting fear to have power and stepping out of the power of love. And so my what I do is bringing people back into that, but I had to be brought back into that first before I could give it
Well,
to anybody else.
yeah, and I mean, so it's really interesting as you're describing, at the time you weren't aware of it, but like your examples of being conditioned to view the world this way are very overt, like very overt ways of, I mean, it's honestly mental emotional abuse. And I don't know if that's ever what's been like labeled for you or how you've termed it, but the way that you were conditioned to view yourself. For many people listening, they might not have these very overt examples of like, I was made to look in the mirror and be told and tell myself I'm a liar. It might have been a little bit more covert. It might have been these little ways where you didn't get the same love and affection from a parent or a caregiver when you got a B versus when you got an A or when you acted a
Absolutely.
certain way. And so, but you start to try to make sense of the world through what these adults who are supposed to be our pillars of safety and security and guidance, what they teach us, what they tell us. And so we don't know any different. We are trusting them many ways blindly to guide us in the best possible way. And their norm is entirely rooted in that. And so you had this, you knew you weren't happy, you knew you weren't connected. Maybe you didn't know at the time you weren't connected. You knew something, like you said, was off, but it wasn't necessarily that you were 12 going, I can tell I'm dissociating from my body and I don't feel my emotions or things like that. But
I had no idea because that
because that was your
chaos.
norm. Yeah.
Right, like, that chaos that lived in and that I did help create because I didn't know I didn't have to create it, was
Yes.
just all the time, right?
Yeah.
So,
Well,
I couldn't identify even, like, if I was sad or I was angry, right? Because
right.
there were even times in my life where I would be told, like, "That's not how you feel, this is how you feel."
Yeah.
So, like, what am I actually feeling?
Right.
The words, "I don't know," would come out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that what you see for many people is I don't know or I'm fine, which is what, again, we sort of internalize of like, that just feels like the easiest way to get people to stop asking because I don't actually have an answer. And what I think is important to point out is, again, whether it's very overt examples or covert examples, the conditioning that we experience, it's not a one time experience. It's this iterative process of conditioning that stops us from being able to make sense of ourselves or like to root to ourselves. And so for many people, they're like, oh my gosh, how do I fix this? How do I do this? I'm like, well, we can't undo something that you spent 20, 30, 40, 50 years of reiterating and recapitulating in a day. Like that's just not going to happen. And I think that's also why we need to bring a little bit more compassion to when someone doesn't realize that they have a different choice, that they don't have to exist that when all they know is that pain. When we see depression, when we see suicidality, when we see self-harm, for many people, they don't think they have an out outside of some of those different pieces, substance use, whatever that is. And so you were fortunate enough to connect with some of these different healing paths and to meet people that helped you bridge that gap and realize, I can change this. For many people, they don't get that or they haven't had that yet. And then they feel this sense of hopelessness. And so
Yeah.
I'm curious for you before we talk about again what the work looks like and how we can make that choice. There was a moment that the insight had to turn into action. Were you afraid to shift out of these stories when even though you didn't like them, there's a comfort in knowing, well, this is how I feel and this is how I show up in the world. Like, did you end up ever having a fear of what happens if I did try something different? If I didn't hold these stories, did you have a thought it could go worse?
There have been many moments on the journey where that fear has tried to keep me from making the next choice forward. Um,
Mm,
and I'll have to say that I haven't given in yet,
mhm,
but have definitely been times where I notice, and maybe I don't notice right away, or I usually don't, no one really notices as soon as it comes in if they're
yeah,
going to start agreeing with that. But there have definitely been times where that fear or that worry of like, what's going to happen when I take this road has definitely crept up on me. I remember
mhm,
um, one of the first energy medicine classes I was going to, I was like so afraid if people were going to like me. And I was like, maybe I shouldn't go because maybe
mhm,
no one's going to like me. Maybe this isn't my thing. Maybe I shouldn't be here. Maybe this isn't my space. Um, and I was like, no, this is where you need to go. This is where you need to be. And in that class, they started teaching about the law of polarity, which was like my real light bulb moment, honestly, learning about the law of polarity. So it's very
mm,
resonant to the conversation that we're having. So the law of polarity is all about how everything in our world has a polarity, right? To have darkness, you have to have light. To have left, you have to have right. To have up, you have to have down, right? That exists in the world. And just like atoms, everything's made of positive and negative. So instead of labeling everything as this or that, going into that black and white way of thinking, it's really to come into that space where you see all the colors that exist and staying
mm,
balanced no matter what's happening outside. It's not being swayed by the praise or the criticism. It's not being swayed by the up or the down, but being able
mhm,
to stay in the eye of the storm instead of being taken away in the cyclone or whatever your storm might be. Maybe it's a hurricane. We've gotten a lot of those in
mhm,
the south of the New England world. I mean, of the New England of the United States. So understanding that that fear does want to stay in control. Like those limitations, you've been operating in those neural pathways for so long that
mm,
you didn't know that you didn't have a choice, that you did have a choice, and you've been operating there for so long that you have to come into awareness of where those triggers are and what those limitations are, and then practice not agreeing with them, and that takes time.
mm,
And so those moments often come in, and when they do, I'm able to recognize them from a place of like, I'm not agreeing with that story. I'm not agreeing with
mhm,
that's the truth. I'm not agreeing that no one's going to like me here. I'm not agreeing that I'm not meant to do this work. I'm not agreeing that my voice doesn't matter. I'm not agreeing that I can't help people. I'm not agreeing that I'm not showing up for myself. Like, I'm not agreeing to those things that have tried to
mhm,
hold me back from going forward. But then
mhm,
there are also not even just the ones that hold you from taking the path. It's the ones that try to keep you in the other way, right? Like,
yeah,
oh, don't worry, you can knock back 8 drinks tonight. You'll be fine. That's totally
yeah,
you're just it's balance, right? Like you're doing this, but you're also doing that. And that's like feeding the 2
mhm,
wolves, right? Trying to ride the 2 horses.
yeah. Well, I think a lot about too, I love that eye of the storm sort of notion because so my daughter and I watched Inside Out 2 on the airplane the other day coming back. And if you haven't seen it yet, oh my gosh, do they do a fantastic job of explaining anxiety. So,
It's
oh,
so good.
it's so good. So listeners, like, side note, put that on your list because they do such a good job of explaining it and you experience that swirling notion when anxiety takes over. And in the beginning, you're like, oh my gosh, it has a plan. It's like telling me what to do so I can feel secure in the shitstorm that I'm in. Because again, you don't know that you could choose something different.
Mhm.
You don't know that the world could feel different. And you can't control your circumstances around you, but you can control you. You spend so many years being unrooted to yourself, you don't realize it could happen. And so you can see in this movie how it's not just like it consumes you in one bite, it is a slow burn and then you have to figure out how to stop it. And I think, a lot of the idea around, at least for my brain, when I think about the stories that would keep me, the fear stories that would keep me from walking forward, and then the false sense of comfort stories that would come in to be like, it's not that bad, were such extreme positions to take. So the same thought of like, when I wanted to start public speaking, you don't have enough credibility. Nobody's going to listen to what you have to say. People aren't going to like you. I still have it. I've now been public speaking for 12 or 13 years. I still have the story that comes in that's like, people aren't going to like you. You suck. You shouldn't be up here. The difference now is when I would hear it before, I never questioned it because it felt like that was an absolute. That's again what you're describing, the truth. I now hear it and I'm able to take it from a place of recognizing the really crazy part is the storm is intending to be helpful because it is trying to give you a position that makes sense in a world that feels chaotic, overwhelming, stressful, where you don't feel like you belong. It's trying to help me. It's just going too far. And so I'm able to now hear it and I go, some people won't like me.
And that's
I can't
okay.
help. Exactly. And then for the beginning, I still couldn't say that part. I was able to go, some people won't like me, but that still hurt. But the idea that I could lessen it, now I can say, it's okay that people don't like me. And that like slow shift. But that was like, I think I talked myself out of public speaking. And this is just a small example of life because this shows up in everything I do. But like, I spent like 5 years just sitting on this dream of wanting to be a public speaker and not doing it because I was afraid. When I finally started, the voice got louder. I'm again 10 plus years in, I still have it. It's just not as loud. And I think the really hard reality is that when you do claim ownership of your story, it's not just a one and done. And sometimes that investment, you also have to like simultaneously with taking the control and the power, give yourself some space to grieve that it's not fair. It's not fair that this feels so hard to do it and making the choice of you don't have to do it. But if you don't do it now, it's your responsibility to say, I'm choosing not to.
Right.
And that shift is major because now I can say, gosh,
Absolutely.
there's some days I'm going to give in and I'm going to feel depressed and anxious and all this stuff, but I'm making a choice there because I know I don't have to be there. The world can still suck, but I am choosing to let it consume me to the degree that it is, and I can choose to walk away from that if I want.
And there's so much power in that awareness and truly
Mm,
the knowing that, like, once you've agreed, like you said, once you agree to the story so many times, right, it takes practice to stop agreeing with it, and also, like you said, it's not like it goes away, right? It
right.
still comes in, we just get to recognize it faster and faster the more that we stop agreeing. The more that we're like,
Yes.
"Oh, yeah, I see you, little stalker, I'm not gonna agree with you." Like, I see and but that's also where we get to take that and use that power of transformation of that changing of the story, the changing in our neural pathways, the changing of, like, that feeling that comes in and using it as our power. So,
Yeah.
instead of looking at it as a detriment of like, "Oh, this is never gonna go away," it's like every time I become aware of it is an opportunity for me to have more power around it, to have more sight
Yes.
around it, to have more awareness around it, to be able to go deeper, because the
Yeah.
deeper we go with ourselves in those areas is the deeper that we can offer that extension to others. The more wisdom around we have around things, the more wisdom we're sharing with others. I mean, by
Mm,
virtue of that, you're doing that right now. Look at all
yeah.
that you've created. Look at all the speaking that you do and all that you've done by just stopping agreeing with that story. And even though you still recognize it as something that comes in now, it's not
Yeah.
something that you agree with anymore.
No. And I think that's so interesting to think about it from the perspective of, again, I mean, I think it's an easy sell to people of where we put our energy, it grows. And so if you put your energy into these negative stories, if you put your energy and your buy-in into whatever, like it's going to grow. The same, I mean, we've seen it in our political climate. We've seen it in all these other areas where if you get stuck in that headspace of fear and complaining and blaming and all of that, it's really hard to get out of those things because you don't recognize there's a different way forward. And then you exist in this, like, to me, it feels like survival mode. Like, it feels like I am not in a rational mind. I'm in a reactive state of protection. But if you ask me what I'm protecting myself from, I don't even know. I'm just there because I don't feel like I can break it down, as opposed to the place where I can go, this is like, and I'm not talking about the state of the world right now, but most like little things, like little stories that come in my head that used to consume me. If I'm being honest, like if somebody doesn't like me on a scale of 1 to 10, that's like a 2. Like I wouldn't even probably know. Like if I got a bad review on something, like I'll be okay. But in the moment, it feels like a 10. And I think it's even that question nurtured with compassion, because what I've really had to learn is my brain makes it a 10, the same as like you believing you were a liar, you believing you were the problem, you believing these things. We can see now that there was malicious intent, probably not conscious, but there's a malicious component to it. There's a certain way that that stopped you. But if you assumed you were the problem over time, that just felt protective. That felt like the best place to be. And so now I have to go back to that version of myself that would buy into those things, assumed they were true, operated from fear, stayed in comfort, and go, how do I show that version of me love and compassion? Because I needed to do what I thought was best to survive. I'm just learning now I don't have to stay in a state of survival. I can learn how to live, and eventually I can learn how to thrive. And that sort of slow insight building and transition, at least for me, felt key. And I'm making an assumption for you that's a lot of how it kind of went in your process. It wasn't just like a boom, boom, it's gone. It was this sort of slow transition to now feeling like you're thriving.
Yeah, and that still transforms, right? Because that
Mhm.
people have this like Mother Teresa idea of compassion, and that means we have to suffer with, right? But true compassion, that energy is the liberation of suffering, and we have to give that to
Mm.
ourselves first. It's having so much love and feeling the power of love, the frequency of love, which is
Mhm.
the highest, most like highest coherent frequency. It holds the highest vibration. If we're entrained to that, if we're rooted there, and we put
Mhm.
that love into action, that's what compassion is. If we're vibrating in that place of compassion, and we have to hold it ourselves for those
Mhm.
places when we might have gone into a 10, and when we
Yeah.
go back into agree with the story, right? It's by
Yeah.
accepting. I like that your last show was radical acceptance, right? It's by accepting
Yes.
those and witnessing from a place of non-judgment when we do, right? The Buddhist idea of perfection is 80% of the time. When I'm in my 20s,
Mm.
it's only about being able to witness that I've been in the 20 and be like, "Oh, okay, I'm making the decision to go back. Cool. So glad
Mm.
we weren't there very long this time," right?
Yes.
What used to be really infuriating, I used to get so mad about myself and then go into shame and blame. But you can't actually shift a frequency with the same frequency that made it, right? So if you are seeing that
Ooh.
you're in 20%, you're in judgment, you're in worry, you're in lack, you're in fear, right? And then you go into shame and blame and judgment, you're not shifting anything, you're just staying there.
Which, as you are pointing that out, I think that is so key to hear for ourselves. If we do that to ourselves when they're in that state, it's not going to work. And I am the part of me that I'm working on now is my state as being a mom, because I am constantly in a state of shame and blame, and I am the world's worst mom on the planet, which I know many caregivers feel that way all the time. And so I'm like constantly having to realize like I need to come at this from a place of compassion and recognizing like my journey to being a full parent, not a perfect
Mhm.
parent. And a full
Yes.
parent is one that models failures and flops and, has these open conversations. And so I think about that, but I'm also thinking about that in the context to us with how we engage with other people, particularly again, when we think about how we talk to young children, but even growing adults, our friends, our parents, a lot of the times we try to use shame and blame as a motivation tactic to get them to go to that 80, and
Mhm.
recognizing that we are only feeding that spiral for them. Like, the classic example when we think about motivational interviewing, like, nobody needs to be told if they smoke cigarettes that it's bad for them. Like, I don't think there's a single person on this planet that, like, is
Sure they
still
know.
thinking like, this is gonna help me. Yeah. So when you're like, think about this and how it's gonna be, how it affects you and how it's gonna hurt other people that love you and the impact you have, like, that's never gonna get somebody there. It is helping them get to a place where they can witness whatever is going on. And, in that state, we're thinking of cigarettes or a substance as a means of avoiding, coping, whatever, to find that place of witnessing and curiosity, and then to work through and build the skills, the toolbox, the confidence that they can move back into that 80, and realizing it's still going to be a back and forth. But we definitely do come from that. I mean, I think about clients I've had in the therapy room that, like, are almost expecting that I'm going to be disappointed in them when they come back and they say something, because their way of engaging with the world is typically someone else reinforcing the shame and blame
Mhm.
as a false sense of motivation to shift into something else, when we don't
And
need
also
more of
a
that.
false sense of love, right?
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
that shame and blame can be a false sense of love, like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed
Yeah.
because I really expected more of you," or, "I worry about you because I love you so much," which is in that same frequency as shame and blame, right? And so
Yes.
we're taught all of these things, and we're taught that they're actually opposite of what they are, right? Worry is a form
Mm,
of love. Shame and blame is a way of motivation. Really,
right.
worry is not a form of love. It's the worst case scenario when using our imagination, which is our highest form of
Yeah.
intelligence, which our brain doesn't know the range between real and imagined. And when we're doing that through the law of cause and effect, which energetically is scientifically proven to exist, right? We are
Hmm.
creating that reality. And then
Mm,
if we're doing the worrying and we're projecting it outwards, we're inviting that reality for somebody else. Same thing when
hmm.
we're like, "Oh, I'm so disappointed." Well, why did you
Hmm.
have an expectation on what I was gonna do?
Hmm.
That's not gonna
Mm.
shift the frequency, that's not gonna help at all.
No. And it's, oh, that's so, I think it's so interesting. And again, it comes back to when you're doing that, you're still playing into those three roles of the drama triangle, the hero,
Mhm.
victim, and villain. And so
Yep.
you're making yourself the victim, and someone else has, like, let you down, instead of giving them their power. Like, they did it. You can have whatever feeling you want, but we don't need to put that on them. That's not going to help them. It doesn't help you. It keeps you and them stuck in those triangles and those constant spirals.
And you're in all those roles when you're doing that,
Yeah.
right? Because if you're making yourself the victim and they're the perpetrator, but you actually just perpetrated against them.
Yeah. I know, and I like that idea of, like, what you said in the beginning of, you're doing all of them at the same time to different parties involved in whatever that process is.
Yep.
Okay, I'm thinking about this. I feel like I always talk about a brain pond. So the idea that when someone comes in, we have this, like, we try to, like, have our brain be sort of this nice and clean and clear pond, and nothing is moving. And it's like, okay, I can predict how I'm going to move through the day. And then my goal is that each of these episodes just, like, completely mucks it up. And it's just rippled and shit's going everywhere. And they're like, I don't know. You kicked up a lot of stuff that I had confidently buried down at the bottom. And now I don't know what to do with this. And I'm trying to move forward. And so that, I feel like we've done that. I feel like we've sufficiently kicked the shit up from the bottom to be like, this is going on. And also, your likely reaction is going to be in that state of shame and blame, either towards yourself or towards someone else. And so I'm curious, as we wrap up, if you could give people an invitation, just like, what's the next step you would invite them to take after listening to this podcast, as they begin this process of unraveling and
Mm.
witnessing and all of this work?
Oh, that is a great question. And that answer is so simple, but it's going to feel so hard.
I'm ready.
It's coming to a place of witnessing it, right? Don't
Mm.
go don't go to the place where you're now noticing all of this muck that has been resurfaced because of this conversation,
Mhm.
and just stay with yourself. Don't
Yeah.
don't go and agree with the shame and blame. Don't agree with the anger that you might feel or the shame that you might feel or the guilt you might feel. Don't agree with it. Just stay and witness it. Because being able to practice that and then still going, "Okay, I'm glad I'm aware now.
Mhm.
I'm glad I'm aware now because now I don't have to operate like that anymore." Or I'm glad I'm more aware now and I get to liberate further. Start to witness, and after you can witness, without going into the shame and blame, without going into the judgment, get excited. Throw yourself a damn party, right? All in gratitude, all in joy. Like, "I'm so happy, I'm aware. Woo, woo, woo! I'm so happy, I'm aware. I'm so happy." Dance it out, shake it out, breathe it out, put some music on, run around in your yard, like, get excited,
Mhm.
right? Once you can witness it, then throw a party almost immediately, simultaneously. Witness, throw a party.
Yeah.
'Cause you're now starting to create a new way that your brain is witnessing something, and you're doing a pattern interrupt, right? So
Mm.
instead of, like, witnessing it and then sitting with it and mulling it over and then going into the shame and blame because you don't know another way, witness it,
Right.
throw a party. Do a practice right then and there. Something that is
Mm.
really going to keep you in that place of witnessing and that place of non-judgment.
Mm. I love that, and I think about, listeners, as you do this, you're gonna try it, and you may be able to do the witnessing and to hold it for 30 seconds, and then you might dive in, and you might start to believe it, and you might get lost there. That 5 seconds, that 30 seconds,
Throw a
that
party
is
for it.
still something. Yes,
Yeah,
exactly. We still
still.
need to celebrate that. Like, just the idea that you looked before you dove in
Yep.
is a big deal. And so I also think, and I don't know your thoughts about this, but I think pairing that witnessing of whatever the emotion is and the thoughts that come with it is also starting to recognize what your go-to reaction is. Like for me, I want to dive in and I want to bathe in the self-loathing. For some people, they go immediately to avoidance. And so they want to go throw on a podcast about something funny. They want to go, down a rabbit hole of Instagram or TikTok or Netflix or whatever it is, or they're going to go throw a drink back because everything feels too heavy now. And so recognizing that, and even again, if you engage in these coping mechanisms of diving in or trying to run away and avoid at all costs, even just being able to name that is starting to recognize this is what I feel and this is what I do when I feel this way. Even if you complete the pattern, you've still named it. So going back to what you said, that witnessing, that coming into that state of awareness is the key point to then making action meaningful and sustainable for you instead of just doing shit and basically playing whack-a-mole trying to figure out what'll stick so you stop feeling so shitty.
Abso-freaking-lutely. That is exactly what's happening because we have to see it to free it, right? If
Mhm.
we're not seeing what the emotion is and what the story is and what the pattern is, we can't then stop that pattern, right?
Mm.
The idea of being able to witness it and then throwing the party for that awareness is the pattern interrupt, right?
Yeah.
If you still follow through with that cycle, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. I still you don't discard the having a party for the awareness,
No.
right?
You go
And
to your
then
20 and you come back to your 80 like you said.
right, you just it's okay. You can when
Mhm.
you start, it's probably gonna be more the opposite. It's probably gonna be like 20/80, right?
Yeah.
That's fine, and the more you do it, the more that goes from 20 to 80 to 30 and 70. My math was not mathing there for a second. It goes to 40 and 60, it goes to 50 and
Yeah.
50, it goes to 60 and 40, right? You then
Yep.
in increments, you build your way up to like, okay, now 20% of the time I'm staying in the witness. I'm staying
Yeah.
throwing a party because I didn't complete the pattern. I'm
Yes.
staying there.
Yes. Oh,
Instead of like, oh, I witnessed, I threw a party, and then I completed the cycle.
yep. Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay. Now, my last question, because there are going to be people that are like, all right, I'm going to go do this. And then once I've done this and I've built some skills, I need to connect with Margie. I need to be able to go deeper. And so, what is the best way or place for people to reach out to you when they are ready to take that next, to go from the 20/80 to the 30/70? And they're like, I'm ready for somebody to be with me in that. And this is my person.
Yeah, the best place that someone can reach me is my website, www.prismofbrilliance.biz. All of my contact information is there. There's also free resources that are available there. I build playlists. I have book suggestions. I have videos that are up on there. So even if you're like, okay, I like the sound of her voice, I have a meditation that's on there. I have a connections prayer that's on there. If you're like, oh, I'm really interested in chakras and I want some music to go along with my day, right? I have a,
Mm-hmm.
a playlist for each chakra. I have a mantra playlist, a subtle body energy playlist. I've got a list of books you can start reading. I have a ton of free resources. And you're like, I love everything she was saying, but she's not quite the right fit for me. I also have a list of all of the people that I work with in my community. So there's
Mm.
other people who are doing the same work who might resonate even more.
I love that. I think that right there is a testament to some of the work that you've done on a professional level too, because when we're in those states of fear and competition, it stops us from being able to really create that space for healing on such a grand scale. Because the reality is we can't help everyone. We're not meant to help everyone. And yet when we're in that back in that triangle, we believe we're supposed to. And so I love that you are not being like, well, I am the person and meet with me, because some people are going to want to. And you're right. Some people, you just want to help them do the work. So I want to honor that that's a really important thing. And for listeners to know that's not as common as you might think, that people are like, let me just get you connected to the resources to make a change. And so just the safety and security and finding people that are like, I want to help you. This isn't really about me is key. So I will make sure that that link is down in the show notes. I think that for all of you, just to even just check out some of those free resources, those playlists, I've checked out 2 of them already. I think they're incredible. I think just like continually doing more work around all of this. And again, just for me, I always think about what's the next 1%. I like the way that Margie talks about it in the concept of kind of percentages and really allowing ourselves to break that down. And I think what we're both saying is that change is incremental and it's never done. It is an iterative process. Sometimes you're going to have gone from 20/80 to 60/40 and now you're back to 10 and 90 and things happen and that's okay. And so again, just knowing if it's linear and it feels like it's easy, you're probably not doing something that's actually changing your brain's patterns. You're probably doing something to avoid or suppress. That's okay. No judgment. Coming back to it's likely supposed to feel hard and to feel painful and to feel big and deep, because most of what is going to happen is we come to terms with emotions we've been suppressing for decades. So if we don't feel that, we're probably not making some of that meaningful change. That being said, Margie, this is awesome. Thank you so much for coming into this space, for sharing your wisdom, your insight, all of these different ways of thinking and these questions we can be walking away with for ourselves. This has been absolutely incredible. Listeners, I hope that you take so many of these nuggets with you. Remember, you can come back to this episode as many times as you want. So for today, maybe you just take with you this notion of, I'm just going to witness what I'm feeling right now. I'm not even going to be focused on the content of what they talked about. I'm just going to witness. And then you come back and you take your next piece. And then you know the link is in the show notes when you're ready to connect with Margie and different resources at any point in the future. Otherwise, we will see you back here next Sunday for another episode.